Welcome to the Lean Loop. In this podcast, we will be highlighting and exploring tenets, themes, and tools that are helpful to you in terms of being able to promote you as a great lean leader. I'm Dr. Shannon Flummerfelt, your podcast host. Today, the topic is beta and the best. And what this means is we're going to be looking at the differences between something called MVP, also known as minimally viable product, versus Six Sigma. So let's begin. The difference is with MVP that we're looking at this idea of working very fast. So we fail fast to learn fast. So when we're all bogged down with bureaucracy and approval channels and things like that, then we won't be the first to the market. So we're trying to be the first to the market with the minimal amount of features that the market will accept because we're trying to get to those early adopters and get our business hypothesis proved in the marketplace. And so speed to market and quick iterative feedback loops is important. So this would be an example of where an agile structure and approach would make a lot of sense. We also, of course, would incorporate lean because it will help us to understand how far we need to go based on the voice of the customer to get rid of any of those rough edges or process or product defects. On the other hand, Six Sigma is very much about doing the deep dive, conducting the due diligence so that we do it right the first time. So Six Sigma is about this level of extreme precision at a 3.4 defects per million opportunities. And so what we would do is basically, we're at zero defect here with Six Sigma. And what we're trying to do is use this when we have to have something that is, Six Sigma level, reliable, consistent, and we can tell this by process control. With minimally viable product, the marketplace is your control mechanism to tell you whether or not you've got something that has value. Here with Six Sigma, we do it very differently. And of course, the DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control process is used. So when we're using MVP, there's advantages and disadvantages. The same thing with Six Sigma. So what's great about this is to understand these are approaches that you can select, and we're going to look at now the emerging hybrid of this that's now happening. But you can merge these together or keep them separate. And also we'll talk about how AI folds into all of this. But just on the basics, on the surface, MVP means that you will have a low initial investment because we're trying to use our money basically to advertise and to reach our customers with this just core functionality in place. We don't go that far with it. So oftentimes you'll see this in software launches where, there's going to be versions and updates and versions, with updates and on and on. And what they're using is an MVP approach for that. What happens here is that you have a high tolerance for risk because you're trying to minimize that capital expenditure up front and preserve it. And so you're just saying, it's okay. We know we're going to have minor bugs. We know we're in this iterative loop of continuing going back and trying to make it better and better. So it's a very different working model, operational model, and it has different metrics. The quality control is simply reactive. What does the user tell you? What other kinds of data are you gathering about where things need to be fixed and aren't working well? And then what we're trying to do for market entry is we want to be the first mover out there. And so that requires, a different mindset, a different set of tools, a different set of goals and so on. Six Sigma, on the other hand, is very different. And this is where we're looking for an investment that's going to be very high. And that's because there's significant investment in testing and infrastructure. We hear this, for instance, coming from someone, our founders like from NVIDIA, where Jensen Huang is saying, we knew we were doing something very, very hard and we were going to get it right. And so, this is not an MVP approach that he's describing for what NVIDIA is going for. And of course, the idea that there is zero defect thinking, even though these things are very complex, we have to get it right. If you are, trying to launch a rocket ship or provide a medical device, where people's life is at stake and so on, or big, breakthroughs are at stake that have to be accurate and the systems are very complex, then, the risk tolerance here is zero. We embrace the complexity of it and we work with it till we get it to that point. Quality control, again, it's proactive, so we use failure mode and effects analysis and other kinds of detection to try to see where those faults might be, and keeping this again in this very intensive testing cycle. And what's going to happen though is you're not going to be the first to market probably, unless you have something that's totally never been thought of before. Like for instance, if you review what Steve Jobs did with the design launch of the iPhone, he wanted that to be like just permanent. And even today, the overall design and look of the aesthetics of the iPhone remain because that became a gold standard of stability. So Six Sigma was the approach for that. Other components of the iPhone, maybe not so much, but anyway, these are examples of what we're looking to do. Now, Jobs was because he was doing a transformative product and not just an improvement or innovation. He was holding the market essentially, and he could go through, the gold standard work of a Six Sigma approach. All right, now when you navigate the trade-offs here, MVP, the problem is, your first exposure to customers, you have to be really careful. It can't be below what the market will tolerate. You want to be at that minimum tolerance level because, you might not get those customers or clients back. And the Band-Aid fixes that you see when there's what we call technical debt, there's some problems with that, right? And so if things are really messy when you're going to scale, or maybe, you're going to go through an IPO or something like that, you're going to have a problem because you've got these bad Band-Aids through everything. And then, of course, we have to be careful because MVP doesn't hit the full marketplace. It's going to be these people who love to be the early adopters. They love to give you the feedback, and maybe the broader marketplace doesn't have that kind of tolerance for variance that you're using here. With Six Sigma, the problem is you can always overanalyze, right? I mean, you can over engineer, you can just get this what's called analysis paralysis. And also, in turn, what happens is Six Sigma can be very stifling with innovation. And so, you take a look at some of our large organizations, and they're large, so they're trying to control quality, and they're using Six Sigma. But then, what does that do in terms of stifling innovation? I know there's some good examples from many of our very large organizations where the idea of going to something disruptive, it just will not make it up the chain. People just won't approve it. It's just too far out of scope of what they're trying to do. And then Six Sigma can be actually, cost ineffective, right? Because it just takes so long to try to figure this out to get it to zero defect, and it may not work that well. So when you look at that and you consider MVP versus Six Sigma, you can have different business models. Let's say you have a franchise and you're going for consistency and scaling up. You have sort of a medium speed to market, and your risk level is low because, if you're the franchisee, you've got this set system, right? So this is very consistent. This would probably be better with Six Sigma. If your model is you're creating innovation hubs and you're looking for those breakthroughs and you want it to be a fast experimental cycle, very collaborative, we see this, for instance, in concurrent engineering centers. And, you see this idea of we're sharing information back and forth so that we can get this innovation out there. And of course, the risk level, as we've discussed, is very high in terms of what can happen there. And then sometimes you just have this full ecosystem and you have this enterprise system that is just what you're trying to do is dominate the market. And this will be, again, a slow to build and kind of a medium risk level. It probably falls more in line with Six Sigma than MVP. So here's one of the things that we talk about with MVP, because the where you're investing your money with MVP is you're trying to acquire customers. So you spend all your money to get to that. But then what happens is when you are trying to scale up, the cost of poor quality is what can be very, very harmful. So what we would take is like, let's take this example. Let's say you have an MVP crisis and you have a software startup, 1,000 users, and there's a bug that gets that deletes data. All right. So the MVP is going to say, okay, we take that back in, we count that as a learning moment. We don't stop the presses, we just keep moving and we keep improving it. But now what happens is if that company grows from 1,000 to 10 million users, you have that same bug. And what you're going to get is, something bigger, a class action lawsuit, a nightmare, millions lost in revenue, whatever that might look like. So here's where you want to understand that preventing one defect, if you're an MVP, is actually cheaper than than fixing one, right? So if you have to go back when you're scaling, that's problematic. And so this is when you'll see the MVP organizations, they'll bring in the black belts, the Six Sigma uh, experts to try to get this chaos under control and audit it. But it's a costly mistake to do that. And so what we look at is MVP, this culture emerges around what we call heroics. And, we see our hardworking employees, they're working to fix problems and they're just doing it all of the time. Where a Six Sigma organization doesn't rely on the heroics. They rely on the systems. They rely on the process mapping. They rely on the process control, right? And so in Six Sigma, we would see process mapping, right? Where the company will take something that's just been done chaotically or what we might call organically or creatively, and they're going to put it into a way of seeing it, like with a SIPOC diagram, where you're looking at the supplier, the input, the process, output, and customer, or any other kind of process mapping, right? Value stream mapping or whatever that might be. The other thing is that this idea of reducing the variation. So when you're kind of moving away from MVP, because you don't actually know exactly what that common shared experience is or what those common mistakes are, right? Is it a mistake that's happening within control limits? Or is it outside of control limits or outside of specs, right? So we're trying to find that variance that goes beyond the tolerances. And so in Six Sigma, we're setting this up as, zero variance within whatever those tolerances are. So for instance, if you've got if you're a school system and you've got kids boarding a bus, you want to make sure you've got every kid on the bus who's supposed to be there, or especially when you're taking them home, right? And so you have to set up a zero variance on how kids get on and off the bus. If you're flipping hamburgers in preparing a Big Mac, that's all highly standardized and so it is with many of the production systems that we have, because we want that no matter what comes across, that first one will be the same as all of them, assuming the first one is zero defect. Okay, so what's emerging now is this idea is there's a hybrid um, uh, strategy here because if you start out with full Six Sigma, your innovation hubs go away, your creativity goes away, and so what you do is you don't want to just have the MVP model and all those risks. So you have what's called a two-speed operating model. And so you will look within your organization and you will see what those verticals are, and you'll set up a structure and a protocol and a culture around what that model is. So, for instance, if you have research and development and design, right, those you want to be tapping into brainstorming, idea creation. It's messy, right? You kind of have this general idea. So that's where you would use MVP and Agile. But if you have manufacturing and finance, and now you can't afford to have an error on the assembly line, you can't afford to have an error in payroll. So Six Sigma is the way to go. If you are looking at CX and your customer support work and what that all looks like, some organizations are just really tightly tied to customer feedback, marketplace reaction, and so on. And really, then you're not really just talking about Six Sigma, but Lean Six Sigma, because you're focused very specifically on what is happening in that customer or consumer experience where you're trying to look at how do I get that voice of the customer? If wait time bothers them or resolution steps are difficult, then that's what we'll do. So you can see here that you can, within one organization, have a variety of approaches going on. You just have to figure out how that's all going to come together so that it works fluidly. So what we do is we call something we do this by setting up organizational buffers, and this is called ambidextrous leadership, right? Because you're going to be able to use MVP and Six Sigma and Lean Six Sigma, and it's not going to be a stress. So the organizational buffers, we look at a firewall. So you want to keep your MVP teams and your Six Sigma teams, let's say, in different reporting structures, maybe even separate them in different buildings or what have you. But you're looking for Six Sigma is all about the KPIs, the quality piece. MVP is measured by OKRs, which are your objectives and key results. So you'll look at the number of failed experiments or the amount of response in the marketplace, right? So they're very, very different ideas here, but you can run both of them. And so, what you would do here is you'd set up a sandbox, and you hear this a lot of times when you listen to tech developers talk about this. They talk about, well, we have a sandbox here for that. That's really common terminology. And this is what allows teams to bypass Six Sigma if the project is, within certain parameters set up, right? And so you can try a product launch with MVP to a small percentage of users. So it's like your pilot, right? And you're going to go through this. You're just going to let it go. Let's see what happens. But then you've got the quality assurance gauntlet. It has to be passed through later, and as long as you have this in the sandbox, if you have a way to kill the project, it's called a kill switch, then it's okay. So when we move from Six Sigma to Lean Six Sigma, um, Pure Six Sigma is about precision. Lean is about speed and waste reduction. And there's a lot of attention in Lean and Six Sigma about respect for people. That includes internal and external people that your enterprise touches. And so that's also a very tacit piece that gets born into all of this. And that's why we have collaboration vertically and horizontally, within companies and so on. So what we do here with Six Sigma to Lean Six Sigma is we're really looking at, we want to get rid of waste, right, while keeping the high quality zero defect mentality. And so this will work for a fast moving business. Okay, if you have a very rigid system, then it's probably not so good. So what happens here is where can we go wrong? Well, there's a death spiral checklist, and that's where your team is obsessed with the metrics and they care about the process more than the result, right? Does the customer actually want this? This could be the most beautiful design in the world, and all your design engineers are totally sold on it, but does it actually work in the marketplace? And so you get obsessed with the metrics. Also, if there's a culture that makes it very hard to ask questions, if it's not safe to fail, then a fear of failure will keep people from experimenting and doing what they need to do. Also, it's easy to excuse me, over process, so to speak, this whole process by having meetings and levels of approval. And so meeting bloat is something you want to stop. And then if you're just keep working on what you already have and it isn't going that well, maybe it's time to scrap that. And so you get that incrementalism instead of just saying, I have to move on now for a moment. So what we would do is we would say we use MVP so we understand the right target market, right? What mountain are we going to climb here? And then we use Six Sigma to find the best way to get to the top of the mountain, so to speak. And also then to make sure that we have a focus on that customer experience as well. Okay, so what's happening now, as you all know, is we have both agentic IA and generative design, and this is like huge breakthrough time here for us in terms of trying to figure out, do we want to go with that, high risk MVP, but then take the slow to market Six Sigma approach. And so we have this combination. It's called high velocity, which is MVP, precision, which is Six Sigma. So we have high velocity precision. And so that ugly MVP is going to go away. And what you do is you use AI to do this. So for instance, for generative development, we would see in MVP, you can go in and use AI and you can build code that has a quality, four times higher than you might get in a first view version. And you can do it in like 2 days versus 5 years. So the idea that generative development is going to be low quality and, people intensive to get it there is not really accurate if we move to AI in the generative development. Um, and then also we see for market testing, we see tools like the digital thread, synthetic user simulations. And what you would find there is that personas are created, and those would represent typical profiles of your customer or ultimate customer. And you can run that through as a digital thread in just a matter of seconds, right? You can test everything you want to test. And in other words, it cuts down all of the silos that we see in what was known as the engineering V, where design and then testing and then moving to production and sales and so on, that can just be condensed down into a very, very short iteration of work instead of having it all strung out. So when we look at Six Sigma and we put DMAIC on autopilot, what you can find through Six Sigma is this precision you need, right? So you use AI and you have automated root cause analysis. When we get into these smart factories, we can use sensors as opposed to human observation. While this is all going on, instead of having to wait for later. And so your alert system, right, your signaling will let you know. And these can be done with cobots where humans and machines are interacting together. But you can get everything in there. I mean, you can find out anything that you want to find out. Why is this product delivery delayed? you do a root cause analysis. And the reason you do that is because when you have a delivery delay, let's say, what do? You go and holler at the line operators and say, you guys need to work faster. Or, what do? No, you need a root cause analysis to figure out why did this delay happen? And you dig down into it deeply until you actually figure out what's going on. And sometimes it could be just something that would be hard for the human eye to see or comprehend because it could be something embedded in a complex system. It could come from the interactions of a complex system, which tends to be very like emergent and hard to follow for us humans. So AI can help us with this. And then also the way that Six Sigma and AI work together nicely is when you find this, you can build in autonomous correction. And so when you're trying to control where you have variation, you can now go ahead and do what's called a hot fix in real time. And so that's fantastic. So we see this, we can see this, like, for instance, in the self-driving cars, the autonomous vehicles, and so on. And, there will be those real-time adjustments because all the data is coming in, about the weather and the road conditions and lane changes and whatever it might be. And so that can be automatically, autonomously corrected. It doesn't need a human to interact with it, which would slow it down. And then you've also got this idea where you can, instead of going through a huge amount of design, development, and manufacturing and testing, where you're looking in Six Sigma at the very end, you're looking at these defects per million opportunities. What you can do is just like we did in MVP, we use, instead of a digital thread, we use a digital twin on actual products, and we can very quickly mimic anything that we need to mimic or test and validate very, very quickly before we ever move into manufacturing. Because a lot of times, we're so far down the line, we're out of all the production cells that went on before, and now we're at the end and we find something is wrong. That's really expensive and really timely. Now with Six Sigma, you wouldn't accept that at the end of the line, but if you introduce AI and you get this high velocity precision, you can now do Six Sigma in a very cost-effective way. And so this bimodal strategy is important. So you want to use AI-enabled MVP that'll give you an edge in the marketplace, and AI-driven Six Sigma, which will take care of your core functions. So what'll happen under MVP, you will have generative AI giving you a creation. In Six Sigma, you'll have all kinds of predictive analytics. So predictive AI will allow you to do what? Optimize, where you can pick the best set of factors. I mean, sometimes we measure things we don't even need to measure because it really doesn't matter. And so you can figure out how to optimize even the idea of how to create your predictions. With speed under MVP, this is instant prototyping with digital thread and digital twin. With AI-driven Six Sigma, we get real-time monitoring, and then also the autonomous correction can happen as well. So the role of the human in this is interesting because we need to think about what have we been doing as managers and leaders, as lean leaders, as Six Sigma experts in our organizations we work for. Well, with AI-enabled MVP, your human role becomes that you are curating ideas because the generation of ideas is going to be so much quicker and deeper and comprehensive. Now, it doesn't mean that we could never do this as humans, but we're wasting all the time and the social capital to get there, right? So you become, as a human, you're a creator of ideas. And under AI, you're going to be the auditor of the AI guardrails. So with Six Sigma, you're auditing, okay, are we getting this optimization we're looking for? Are those AI guardrails correct? And so that bimodal strategy with AI under MVP thinking and methods and Six Sigma thinking and methods can give you very, very different ideas, but they can go on both within an organization if you know how to manage this and lead this. So the goal of AI-enabled MVP is to discover what else can we do? Where are we wasting bandwidth and capacity and potential in our organization? Maybe we have the talent, maybe we have some specialized equipment or some IP or whatever. What else can we do with these assets, both tangible and intangible, that we have? So you're trying to discover something that you haven't thought of before. With AI driven Six Sigma, you're looking for stability. So again, you're looking for that quality, that market credibility. So how can we never fail is the goal there. So you see, what else can we do? We're going to dig in and find the potential, but how can we never fail? We want to get this to perfection. So I hope this summary gives you an idea of what's going on out there in the marketplace and in organizational science when we're trying to make sure that we are offering things that are right, for our organizations based on goals, the resources that we have, and also the vision for the future. If you have a question or need help, please feel free to reach out. Charactership Lean Consulting, all one word, at gmail.com. And you can look me up on charactershiplean.org. Thanks for listening.